Welcome, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Craig. How are you?
I'm doing great. And we're going to be talking about how to prepare today. I'm just getting the documents shared. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about Equivesto before we get started?
Sure. So Equivesto is a new Canadian equity crowdfunding platform. So we help companies, both local businesses and innovative startups, raise equity capital by allowing their community to invest directly in them. They can raise up to $1.5 million per year through equity crowdfunding, and people can participate, not just accredited investors, but all investors can participate starting at only $100.
Yeah, and it's an interesting concept when you start thinking about leveraging your community. And, if you have a bunch of community people, users, consumers of your business who are also investors, they're also champions out there promoting it, using it, telling other people about it. So it's an interesting way to go about things. And over to you, Alex.
Perfect. Yeah. So today we're talking about how to prepare to equity crowdfund. So there's two steps. There's two general steps when preparing to equity crowdfund, two stages of preparations that you'll be making. The first are preparations that you can make on your own before you even come and talk to a platform like Equivesto. And the second would be once you reach out to a platform, the kind of work and preparation that you'll be doing with us prior to actually launching your campaign. So first, I'm going to talk about the preparations you can do on your own before coming and talking to someone like us. So before reaching out, the first step is to make sure you meet the requirements of the platform. So for Equivesto, that's very simple. You need your business to be incorporated. You need to have a minimum viable product or a demo version of your service or product, or a proven track record with your business. So that is just a stage of your business. You're growing it, making sure it's more successful and ready to launch, or you have launched and have proven success. And you need to think about the amount you're looking to raise and make sure that meets the minimum raise amount. Equity crowdfunding works because we're able to get a large number of people investing smaller amounts, but we still need to make sure we're meeting the minimum raise amount because it's still expensive running the due diligence and everything on the different companies. So we want to make sure that there's enough raise to cover the costs of that. Um, and then the next most important thing is actually preparing all the documents that you'll be needing to provide for the due diligence process. So this list of documents is a list of documents that would be requested by VCs or angels as well. It's quite extensive, and it really helps us get an understanding of your business and run the full due diligence process. So I'm actually going to go through each document one by one and talk about the different preparatory work you can do with each of those documents. The first list of documents, the business plan, pitch deck, capitalization table, organizational chart, certificate of incorporation, 5-year annual financial projections, and the purpose and the amount of your raise can all be prepared by your company on its own without any external support or assistance. There are, however, two documents that are required that will need some external support to prepare them. The first are accountant prepared financial statements. So I'll talk about those in a bit more detail, but you need to, for equity crowdfunding, it's a requirement to provide notice to reader annual financial statements as part of your application. And also you need to have a shareholders agreement, which you'll need your lawyer to review and advise on. So those two pieces are external support required. Everything else you can do entirely on your own. And then the third thing you can do before applying is on the marketing and community growth side. So I'm also going to talk about that. But let's just hop right in with some of the documents. So the first document, and probably the longest, most extensive, is the business plan. So Craig is an expert at helping people prepare business plans and really understand their product market fit and align themselves with pricing and business model and everything. And the business plan essentially provides a really high level and detailed view of what you're going to be doing with the company over the sort of next 3 years. So this is the location where you can really demonstrate the level of detail, time, and effort that you and your team have put into your business up to this point. You've gone out, you've researched competitors, you've understood the market, you've found your perfect target niche, you've thought about the million and one ways that you're going to market them, the risks you need to overcome, all that sort of information. This is the document where you can actually demonstrate that to potential investors. So it's usually going to be between 15 and 30 pages long. It's quite extensive, but this is really where you're demonstrating that level of detail. Without this document, just using a pitch deck, for example, it's hard to prove to potential investors the amount of work and the thought that you've really put into the business. So this document is really important to sort of demonstrate that level of detail. The next document is the pitch deck. So while the business plan is a sort of long form description of what your business is up to, the pitch deck is much shorter and more concise and is a clear description of exactly what your business is doing, how it's helping, the value of the business, what you're trying to do with the money, and the amount of money you're trying to raise. So essentially, you want to outline the key details, essentially one slide for each, and keep it really short and concise. You want to identify the market problem, the solution, the team, the business model, traction and success you've had so far, your target market, competitors that you are facing, growth plans, and the raise amount and the purpose of the funds. So this is really a quick snapshot. And so that's really helpful for investors to have, both equity crowdfunding investors and VCs and angel investors. We have a template of all of these documents actually available for free at equivesto.com/templates. So the business plan, the pitch deck, every document that we ask for, we have a free template there that you can use if you like. The next document is actually two documents on this slide, is a capitalization table and an organizational chart. So for those of you who haven't worked with a cap table before, essentially a cap table is a document that clearly outlines the list of all the shareholders, the number of shares they own, the class of those shares, the price per share, and the total shares outstanding. So it really gives a view to who are the owners of the company, how much control do they have, and what do they actually own. And it also will outline sometimes any additional promissory notes or large loans, longer term loans that the company might have. You wouldn't necessarily put shorter term debt on here, like a credit card or something like that. But longer term loans you can also include on a cap table. That's very important so that we can see who else is invested in the company, because we need to run background checks on anyone with over 25% ownership stake in the business as part of our required due diligence process. The organizational chart, this is an optional document, and this really lets us know if there's more than one company, which company owns which company, and who's running each of those companies. But if you just have one company, you generally don't need an organizational chart. The next document we require, and you can prepare, is the certificate of incorporation. So you would have this from the moment you got incorporated initially, and this helps us understand and confirm that your business is incorporated, and we use that as part of our due diligence process as well. The next document, this isn't necessarily a document, but you can prepare it as a document, understanding the purpose and the amount of your raise. So prior to beginning a funding round, whether it's an equity crowdfunding round or a more traditional funding round, it's really important to know exactly what you're asking for and why. Whether it's with us or with a VC, They generally aren't super excited to see someone say, we'd like to raise between 200,000 and 600 million. They find that being too broad doesn't really demonstrate the clear purpose and reason for the capital. So understanding exactly the amount you need to raise and what it's for is helpful. If you decide to work with Equivesto, we can actually help you understand exactly the right amount. So you don't have to be 100% certain about these numbers before talking to us, but it's definitely important to know why you want the money, what you want to use it for, and how those two work together. The next document that
I think I just lost you there, Craig. Okay, am I still there? Can you see me?
Yeah, I think you're back. Your backup plan. Sorry, everyone, I didn't say anything, but we switched to the backup plan. Off we go.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
rapid switch. So the next document that needs to be prepared, that's actually an external support required document, is the accountant prepared financial statements. Craig, I feel like, can you just double check where the slide is for the projections? Oh, no, okay.
I don't see one.
Well, another thing that you can prepare are financial projections that don't require assistance from anyone outside. These should be annual financial projections, and you want them to be as detailed as possible. This really helps, again, demonstrate the level of depth and thinking that you've put into the business and can help drive your valuation. So understanding exactly what all the assumptions are that are going into creating the financial projections and what you see as the potential growth and future expenses and revenues of the business are very helpful in determining the value of the company and demonstrating the level of thought and focus of the management team. So again, preparing your own strong financial projections and having the adequate information and research to back up those numbers and assumptions is very important. The first document that you can prepare using external help, and the document referenced in this slide, is actually accountant prepared financial statements. So it's important, and it's actually a requirement of equity crowdfunding to have an accountant assist you in the preparation of your annual financial statements. Working with a VC firm or an angel group usually doesn't require accountant prepared financial statements, but when working with equity crowdfunding, because you're going out to the general public, it's important to have the accountant prepared statements. So those are usually including the balance sheet, the income statement, and a cash flow statement. If your company is less than 1 year old, a statement of financial position is sort of the equivalent document. And these financial statements must be prepared by an external accountant who is an official accountant. So they have their CPA or something like that. Just for general information, there are 3 different types of financial statements that can be prepared by an accountant. Notice to readers, which are the simplest and the cheapest. Review engagement, which is sort of the middle child in this scenario, and the audited financial statements, which are the most expensive and detailed and complicated. So for equity crowdfunding, you only need to provide notice to reader statements. So the goal of this is to really reduce the cost and the financial burden on companies looking to raise capital. If you're looking to raise using larger amounts, more than the 1.5 million, then you actually need to provide audited financial statements. But with equity crowdfunding, you only need notice to reader financial statements. And with a sort of more traditional accountant or an accounting firm, they should probably only cost about $2,000 Canadian or less to prepare. So again, the idea is keeping the financial burden lower on interested companies.
And definitely get
And
a CPA, right? Everything's all CPA now. It's CA,
yeah,
CPA.
yeah, it's all CPA. And the next document to be prepared is the shareholders agreement. So ideally, when you incorporate, as soon as you have more than one shareholder or owner of the business, you should have a shareholders agreement to sort of provide some structure to your relationship and the relationship of you, the owners, to the business itself. But not every company prepares one of these right away. But certainly when going for external investment, a shareholders agreement is 100% required. Working with a VC or an angel firm and getting investment from them, usually they will require you to rewrite your shareholders agreement in a manner that suits them and the new investment that they're putting into your business. And oftentimes the legal fees associated with rewriting that shareholders agreement, which range between $35,000 and $50,000, are removed from your total raise. So for example, if you've gone out and raised $100,000 from a VC or angel, most often half of that or a quarter or a third of that raise is actually being spent already on legal fees to prepare this updated shareholders agreement. So that can be a large sort of hidden cost to raising with VCs that many people don't realize. You also need a shareholders agreement in order to do an equity crowdfunding round. We provide, as I already mentioned, a free template of a shareholders agreement that you can use. But again, we are not your lawyers. So if you decide to use that template, it is exceptionally important that you review that template in detail with your own legal counsel and modify that as required for your business. Part of the work that gets done after the application is submitted to the equity crowdfunding platform is actually adjusting your shareholders agreement so that it can handle equity crowdfunding. But that's not work that you need to do before applying. So just making sure that you do have a shareholders agreement and you're comfortable with the rights and obligations of shareholders in that agreement prior to applying for equity crowdfunding is important. And the last step, but also a very important one to prepare before running equity crowdfunding, is to build your community and to understand a bit more your marketing environment. So the first step is to grow your community organically. So equity crowdfunding, as much as we might want to claim it's something else, can be a little bit of a popularity contest. So it's important to grow your network and grow your community, especially via social media. Right now, with COVID and everything, it's really important to do that virtually. But you want to have and try to build your followers on all platforms so that there are more individuals who are excited about what you're doing and who you can reach out to, when you're doing your crowdfunding campaign. Something that's really important to realize with equity crowdfunding is the specific rules around advertising versus notifying. So I'm going to get a little bit detailed in compliance for a second, but it's worth it, trust me. So running ads saying, invest in my company, in my equity crowdfunding offering, is actually illegal. So it's illegal to run paid advertisements for a private investment opportunity. That's not allowed in Canada, and I think that's also not allowed in the United States. But notifying your community of your offering is totally allowed and highly recommended. And running advertisements to grow your brand and to market your product and everything, of course, that is allowed, and that can continue during a crowdfunding round. So essentially, you're not able to go out and use paid ads to try to bring more people in to participate in your deal. However, if you already have a larger existing community, you can notify them very frequently with social media posts or emails to them or phone calls or whatever manner, a billboard on your building, whatever it is. You can do unpaid notices and notifications to your community. So prior to running equity crowdfunding, it's exceptionally important to try to grow that community as much as possible. And you can grow that community organically and using paid ads just to grow your brand reach and interest. So those are two important strategies, both doing the solid organic post work and also potentially doing some market research and advertising to grow your brand prior to running an equity crowdfunding platform. The wider your following, specifically in Canada or areas where people are actually able to invest in your campaign, if you have 50,000 followers, in Bangladesh, that's fantastic, but that won't be able to actually translate into more investment during the campaign. So that can be a bit of a challenge. So making sure the growth is in the area you operate and the area you can actually get crowdfunding is important, but you want to make sure you are doing the organic growth and the paid advertising to understand your community. So in terms of organic growth, it's really just about consistency and treating your followers the way you want to be treated as a company. You're basically educating them how to engage with you on social media. So if you post once a month and whenever somebody comments, you just totally ignore them, you're telling them not to pay attention to your posts and not to comment. But if you post consistently, even if it's only once a week or something like that, but you engage with people when they engage with you. They comment, you like the comment, respond to them, get involved, go and find things that your followers are doing and appreciate that. That sort of engagement teaches them that you care about them and you're interested in having that constant sort of connection and responsiveness with your posts. That authenticity and engagement really makes a big difference with building a community. So that's super important. Also important is understanding it from the market research side. So you want to understand their interests and likes and their demographic information from a market research side so that when you want to do paid ads to grow your brand and grow your network, you can do that effectively and provide exactly the kind of information that they're looking to get from your posts. So you want to do a series of A/B testing around the types of posts that people resonate with, both in your community and in what's called a lookalike audience on, for example, Facebook or Instagram. So having both of those things, the organic growth and the responsiveness, but also developing a clear understanding of the market. So okay, they like posts with 3 people in them and not too much copy underneath, but a nice big bold banner. And our posts do really well with men over the age of 30, but younger than 55, and women in this category. That sort of information is really helpful when you want to go and do paid marketing later. So that's sort of the work that you can do prior to engaging with a platform. But after you've done that whole giant list of work that I've just given you, that's when you can start working with the platform. And you don't necessarily need to have all of that ready before. It is just very helpful and it speeds up the whole process. But once that information is prepared, you can actually work with the platform as part of the application process and building your campaign once you've been sort of approved on the platform. So there's 3 key areas basically related to the during application and pre-campaign process. So the first one is preparing the information that's needed during your application. So I know you just made this massive list of documents, but that's actually not all the information that's needed. When running an equity crowdfunding campaign, the requirement of the platform, which is regulated, is to make sure that we clearly understand who you are as individuals, as a company, and that we've done full due diligence on you. That's the requirement of the platform. Applying, you'll need to be able to provide background information on all of the founders, executives, and board members of the company, including any investor who owns more than 25% of the company. So, and again, this is all required information to be able to do the background checks. So name, date of birth, citizenship, address and residential history, educational history, employment history, and contact information. We're not running a credit check or anything like that, so it's not trying to verify, that, oh, if you don't have a credit score above 900, then you don't get to raise capital. It's more making sure that we understand exactly you are who you say you are, and we've verified your identity, and the information that you're providing as part of the campaign is all correct and understood, and there's no criminal activity or anything going on. So this sort of background checks are usually also done by venture capitalists and angel investors, but they are not as regulated as an equity crowdfunding platform is. And so their background requirements is up to their own personal discretion, while ours is required by the securities regulator. Once we've collected all that information, we then work with you on adjusting some legal documents. So I already mentioned you prepared the shareholders agreement, which is fantastic, but now we want to work with you and make sure that the shareholders agreement is set up properly to handle equity crowdfunding. So a shareholders agreement that works with 3 people who are going to be the co-founders and are never going to sell their shares in a million years, and they might, give them to their spouse or something. That's a very different agreement to an agreement that can handle 600 new shareholders all signing into it, but who don't necessarily have the same rights or controls as the founders. So we want to make sure that there's protections in place for the minority shareholders, but also the structure and management of the company is still existing in a way that doesn't negatively impact the founders and the executives running the business. We don't want to require you to have a shareholders meeting every time you need to make a decision, because that means you need to invite 600 people to a Zoom call so they can listen to you have a debate about which new hire makes the most sense for next week. So making sure that the structure of the business, the management order, and all the other pieces like the right share classes, the right protective rights, and everything is all in place, that's important. So the template that we provide on our platform for free includes all of these sort of requirements that we're looking for, but we'll also work with you and your lawyer to adjust your shareholders agreement so that it can fit equity crowdfunding's requirements. At the end of the day, it is of course your shareholders agreement. So if you are not, we're not telling you to put anything in an agreement that you're not comfortable with. And at the end of the day, if it looks like you're not comfortable with our recommended requirements for equity crowdfunding, then we can just not move forward. But it's definitely not a situation where you should be putting anything into any agreements that you, as the founders and existing shareholders, are not comfortable with. And you definitely need legal advice as part of this step. The next document, is the actual legal agreement with Equivesto or the platform. This agreement essentially officially hires us as your dealer and does require review of your lawyer to make sure you understand the implications of that agreement, but it's relatively straightforward. The next is a corporate resolution. Again, this requires review by your lawyer, and essentially this document actually is the corporation giving permission to you as a person to make this deal with Equivesto. So without the corporation agreeing to hire Equivesto, you as a person can't just go and hire us to do all the work that we're doing, because we're helping, you know, talk to you about issuing new shares and changing the structure of the business and everything like that. So it's important that the corporation itself and all the individuals related to that understand the endeavor that you're doing and have agreed to it. So that's what the corporate resolution does. Again, we have a template of what a corporate resolution could look like. And again, it requires review by your lawyer. And the final document that needs to be prepared with legal assistance is what's called the crowdfunding offering document. So all the other documents you gave up until this point are being used for due diligence to assess your business, and some of them, depending on the discussion with you and your team, will be provided on the campaign page for investors to look at during the campaign itself. The crowdfunding offering document is the actual official legal offering document where you're offering your shares for investment via equity crowdfunding to suitable investors. And so that document is around 8 pages and actually outlines all the details of your campaign, the type of shares you're offering, all that sort of information. That information is also displayed on the campaign page, and it's very easy for investors to find it, but the offering document is actually the legal location of the offering details. This document also needs to contain in it all of the posts or notices that will be made on social media as part of promoting the campaign. And so that's why it's required to prepare all of the social media posts prior to the equity crowdfunding round, because of course this document needs to be finalized and completed before your round can start. And inside this document needs to be an image of all of the social media posts that you plan on making during the campaign. Also, the social media posts need to be reviewed by the compliance team of the platform. And so that also needs to take place before the campaign starts. But this is the actual legal reason why they need to be completed before. So Craig, if you're wondering about that, that is why they need to go in this fun document. Next, we can go back to the marketing preparation.
Perfect.
So you're already working with the platform, you've submitted your application. This is where at least in Equivesto's case, the platform starts working with you closely to help you prepare what marketing looks like for equity crowdfunding. So this is the time where you'll actually prepare those 30 social media posts, Craig, that we talked about last week. And this is where, in Equivesto's case, we actually provide a template of what each of those 30 posts should look like and the type of information that they should include. Essentially, you want to prepare posts leading up to the campaign to notify your community that the campaign is going to take place and to sort of activate them and give them a bit of a countdown. And then once the campaign has launched, you want to be obviously notifying them that it's launched, and you want to be providing campaign milestones like, oh, we're 30 days in, we've just hit our 100th investor, we're 50% funded. You also want to alternate those with past business achievements, exciting fun facts and educational content, and details about why you're raising funds. These posts and any posts or commentary that you put on the internet cannot contain details about your actual campaign. One of the core requirements of equity crowdfunding is that the details of the campaign itself and the offering itself are only in one place, which is the campaign page. That keeps things simple and avoids any issues where accidentally you say the wrong thing, and now we're potentially liable because we've said 2 different things that are in disagreement about a securities offering, which is a big no-no. So essentially, we can be notifying people that there's a campaign running. We can be saying, oh, we've reached X percentage milestone in our campaign, and we are raising a campaign to do these things. But we can't be saying things like the shares are being offered at 55 cents a share, and we are raising X number of thousands of dollars, and that sort of details we can't be describing outside the campaign page. However, we can provide general education, like, with $100 minimum, you can participate in equity crowdfunding. That sort of information we can provide. Again, templates of all of these posts will be provided to companies working with Equivesto. We don't provide those, sadly, for free on our template page. Another thing that you can prepare is your actual website. So on the website of the company, you can create a notice section with a link to Equivesto and the campaign page. So getting that set up, getting the colors and images right on your general website is also something that you can prepare here and work with the platform to perfect that. You can also record and prepare a pitch video. So if you're working with Equivesto, we take time to help you understand what should be in the pitch video, the length of it, what that looks like. We highly recommend that people consider working with a pitch coach. The company that we work with and that Craig also works with is called Out Loud Speaker School, and they're really fantastic pitch coaches. So we highly recommend that, when preparing your pitch video, you work with professionals to really help bring that emotion and that excitement and the impact of what you're doing, and really the why of why you're doing this into that video. You really want to bring that passion because that'll help encourage people to participate. And next.
Yeah, I was just posting a link in the thing. Keep going.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. Next is about activating your community. So you can be activating your community and growing community interest all throughout the preparation for the campaign. This ties into some of the marketing posts that you've already prepared and the ongoing community building and marketing work that you were doing while actually preparing your documents before connecting with whatever equity crowdfunding platform you wanted to work with. So this is sort of ongoing work from before, but this is where you can be talking about just your community and your brand and the passion of your business, and growing essentially the number of followers you have on different channels. About 1 month before the campaign starts, that's when you can actually begin posting those posts that you created with the platform, which include the notice about 30 days and everything leading up to the campaign. So as you get closer to the official campaign start date, that's when you can begin posting those and getting your community ready to invest. This is also a great time to actually reach out to core members of your community on a sort of personal basis who you hope might actually participate in your crowdfunding round, and let them know that you are doing an equity crowdfunding round, and if they're interested, this is where they can go and find some information, and the round will be starting. The first week of the campaign, as we mentioned last week, is a really critical week. It's really important to show that that progress and that traction so that other external investors can see there is that sort of existing community engagement. So the first week is really an important week in terms of the campaign success. And so getting your community ready so that when the first week starts, they can hop right in there and get some of that initial traction will really help lead to a more successful campaign. And that's the sort of long list of all the preparations that you need to do to prepare for an equity crowdfunding round. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any and all of your questions.
Yeah, and I've just noticed mentioning that we do office hours or you do office hours, and I'm
Yes.
putting if people want to book a 30-minute one-on-one session with you, they can do that in the link I'm just putting in the chat room. And there's new times and dates available for people through August and September. So there's only one slot left for July, and I'm sure that'll be booked up pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, so we had a few questions here. So I wanted to get to the beginning. I know Imran's been waiting for a while, but he's incorporated in the U.S. by the sounds of it, and he wants to know whether U.S. companies can apply.
So US companies cannot raise capital on Canadian equity crowdfunding platforms. Essentially, the incorporation of the business determines the securities regulator that that business falls under. And as I mentioned, equity crowdfunding is highly regulated. And so your platform that you would work with for equity crowdfunding needs to be registered in the same area as your business. So if you're looking to do an equity crowdfunding in the United States, you would need to work with a US based equity crowdfunding platform. There's a whole list of fantastic platforms out there in the US that are operating and are very successful. So I would highly recommend looking at those. There's a big list.
So you mentioned all these different rules about where and when you can mention your campaign.
Yeah.
So Scott was asking, can you mention your campaign on your website even though you're not promoting brand products in
Yes.
ads? Yeah.
Yes, you definitely can. I buried it a little bit in my presentation, but I did try to cover that for a second. So you definitely can mention you're doing a campaign on your website. That's actually a core important place to mention you're doing a campaign. So you can prepare however you prefer an area on your homepage that identifies you are running an equity crowdfunding campaign, and you can invite people via a link if they're interested to participate, and then that link would go straight to the campaign page for your business. So that's sort of how you could direct them there from your website. But that's highly recommended. Great question.
Are there types of businesses that inherently lend themselves to equity crowdfunding, and conversely, are there types of businesses that don't work well usually?
Yes, that's a great question. We talked about that a little bit last week, but I'm happy to talk about it again for sure. Essentially, yes, there are businesses that are a bit easier to present to the public. So either the business is doing something exciting and is going to have a direct positive impact, either locally or internationally, or a business that is a bit more consumer facing lends itself well to equity crowdfunding. However, that being said, even if your business isn't consumer facing, if you have a very strong why and a strong network, that can also translate to a successful campaign. It's important, and another benefit of companies that lends strongly to a campaign is having that community as well. So having an existing social media community of some sort, the bigger the community is in the area where you're raising capital, is definitely something that's going to lend itself well, even if you aren't as consumer facing. And then companies that wouldn't lend themselves as well are companies that are highly technical and might not necessarily have a super strong why or passion behind the business, and also companies that don't have a lot of core assets or value that they're creating, which is proprietary to the business itself. So if you are running, for example, a consulting firm and the value of your business is actually in the individual consultants, so if all of them were to quit, then there wouldn't be much value actually left in the business itself. That also would not lend itself as well to equity crowdfunding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Linford's asked a question here. Can companies on Equivesto platform allow discounts for early investors? So is there stretch goal type things you are allowed to do on the crowdfunding platform?
So that's a great question. It's a little bit complicated because you are issuing securities and you want the issues listed, the securities listed and offered for issuance during the campaign do need to be consistent throughout. But you could offer essentially a private campaign prior to the launch of your wider campaign, which you could have a lower offering price if you wanted to do something like that. So essentially what you would do is you would run two campaigns. The first campaign would be private and smaller with a reduced rate, and anyone who participated at that point would get the reduced price per share. And then when the wider campaign opened, you would have the traditional price per share. But you can offer, again, this complicates it much more, and so it's generally advised against. But you could offer different classes of shares for purchase, which would each have different minimum investments and things like that. But we highly recommend you don't do things like that to further complicate the investing structure. We want to try to keep it as absolutely clean as possible. But you could consider non-share-based incentives for the first X number of investors who participated. That's fine. So you could say, for the first 100 investors who signed up, you get 10% off our products for the next year or something like that. You could do something like that for sure. But again, this would all need to be discussed with both your lawyers and our lawyers and everybody's lawyers.
Can you physically give them a t-shirt or something?
Definitely, you can physically give them a t-shirt.
Yeah, I just want to make sure about the rules. Like here,
Yeah.
I'm a happy investor or whatever. Just
oh yeah, you can totally do that. You can, and that's a great way to help incentivize the campaign. You can create, investor swag and all that kind of stuff. You can
It's
definitely
funny.
do
I was
that.
talking to a gym owner who was thinking about this kind of thing. Who up in the Muskoka areas, they just opened when COVID hit and forced everybody to close down. They got all the investments, the real estate, the lease signed, all the equipment in. And so they were looking at something like this and say, well, if we can do this, maybe we can offer the people who invest an investor membership that gives them X% off and
Right.
helps all these things. So we were brainstorming these types of things around that. So yeah, saying I'm an investor, I support local, all that kind of stuff is making
Yeah,
people proud.
you can totally do that for sure.
So this may be, I'll ask you because it's a generic question. What is the usual crowd-funded amount raised? And I think it's generic, so.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one thing that's worth keeping in mind is that different countries have different maximum crowdfunding limits. So for example, in the United Kingdom, I know companies that have crowdfunded 20 million pounds successfully. So it's hard to sort of do a sort of comparison that way. I think we would say, based on our view of the market internationally, I think it's on average between $500,000 and $700,000 being raised is usually the sweet spot for what I would call a seed round investment with companies that are offering equity crowdfunding in other jurisdictions where they can go beyond, much further beyond the 1.5 million that we're limited to in Canada. Then they're not, I wouldn't say they're raising for a seed round. They're then doing a Series A or a Series B. So given we're limited to the 1.5 million, I would say we're limited to what's called a seed round. And so based on that, if we look at seed rounds internationally, they're usually between 500 and 700,000 on equity crowdfunding platforms.
So Yassine says that, maybe there's investors in the U.S. who might be interested in her Canadian incorporated company, her federally incorporated company. Can they do that? And I guess I'm asking you on the platform and off the platform.
Yeah, so this is where it gets pretty annoying. But essentially, the way the rules around equity crowdfunding are set up is you can only raise capital for a business where the platform itself that's doing the raise is regulated. And I don't know of any platform in the entire world that is regulated in more than one country, because it is exceptionally difficult and generally not really allowed. So and this is where it gets rather annoying, but if you wanted to raise money from US investors, you need to be a US company. And if you want to raise money from Canadian investors, you need to be a Canadian company if you're using a sort of regulated, structured platform style investment like equity crowdfunding. If you're going a more traditional route, then you can raise money from essentially anyone in the world, and you can do that sort of on an individual basis. But again, in those situations, not to get too much into the legality and the compliance, but when raising any form of capital, you actually either need to issue a prospectus, which is going public, or you need to use what's called a prospectus exemption in Canada. So a sort of different way of raising capital that the government has created so you don't have to go public every time you start a business. And there are several different exemptions. Every time you raise capital, you're using one, even if you don't know it. And most people have been using what's called the private issuer exemption, because that one requires no reporting of any kind to anyone. And that's what most people use just sort of automatically when they go out and, raise $100,000, their sort of first round in a traditional way. So technically, you're still following regulation for that. So if you went to go and raise capital from investors in the United States, you would still need to use the prescribed exemption restrictions and whatever those would be. So yeah, it's a very complex answer to your question, but the short of it is no.
And that's fair, but I think you've actually hit on a lot of stuff there. So that's great. Thanks. What is the typical stage that you see startups going through equity crowdfunding?
Yeah, so it really depends, because just to reiterate, it's not only startups that can use equity crowdfunding. Existing businesses, even like local businesses, they can also use equity crowdfunding. But with startups, usually because the maximum investment limit is 1.5 million in Canada, usually we're getting startups that are doing seed round raise that use equity crowdfunding for this. When you look internationally, where they don't have that 1.5 million limit, like I mentioned in the UK with the 20 million raise, you're seeing companies at Series A, Series B, Series C rounds using equity crowdfunding. But because of that limit in Canada of 1.5 million, usually the startups are, as I mentioned, in the sort of seed round. So they're just hitting revenue, or they're even pre-revenue, but they've built their product or service, they're ready to go to the market, and the money will help them go to market for the first time or sort of scale their offering as they grow.
And I've seen a lot of different types of companies. I mentioned this at the beginning, looking at equity crowdfunding as a loyalty building program. Or,
Totally.
I've talked to a few restaurants who are thinking, exactly how do I get the locals to think of me first? And so, well, if you figured out how, they want to keep their local business going, this restaurant that's been here for 30 years, you say, invest $500, you're going to get the investor discount thing. But, and, who are they going to think of when they want to order out or go out? Are they going to go to the place they're proud to own a part of and support,
Right.
or are they going to go to some random place? And who are they going to meet with their friends at? And who? So, it's one thing to talk about raising money, but it's another thing to look at this as a strategic business initiative and a way to grow your business.
Right. A lot of companies that we talk to are exactly what you just described. So they're in a financially strong position. They're not necessarily looking for capital purely to grow the business or as a requirement, but they see this as a fantastic opportunity to actually invite their community to get more involved with the ownership of their business. And that ties in with their whole mentality and approach. One thing that's worth noting is with equity crowdfunding, the company can help set the class of share in the shareholders agreement that they're issuing as part of the round. And so many companies opt to issue non-voting common shares. And so this allows them to avoid any sort of control issues that people might be worried about related to suddenly having 600 new investors. So by issuing non-voting common shares, the ownership and the control of the business the ownership with respect to the control situation remains with the shareholders that are existing or who own the specific voting class shares. So the people who would be investing in equity crowdfunding that receive non-voting shares would be owners in the business. They would benefit from any payout of the business, a dividend or a sale or anything like that, but they're not trying to exercise control over what the business does. They're just excited to be investing and supporting the business, but they're not trying to, I own 0.00001% of your business, and so now I'm in charge kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way to go. It's just a way of building loyalty and a sense of pride and ownership, how you're helping locally and how can you help. We all want to help local companies, and this is an
Right.
interesting way to enable that. So the last question I have here is, what does Equivesto charge for this? If we wanted to use your platform, how does that work?
That is a great question. So for investors, Equivesto is always free. For companies, there is a $1,000 application fee, which, after we talk to you and we determine that, you're a fit for equity crowdfunding and you want to proceed, there's that $1,000 non-refundable application fee, which covers a small portion of the due diligence costs, nowhere near all of them. And then we charge basically a brokerage success fee of 7% of the successful raise.
So it's $7,000 on 100,000.
Yeah.
So that's great. That sounds very reasonable, and it sounds like with all your templates and help, you're well on your way to making companies successful.
Yeah. The idea is when we started the business, we started it as founders of other businesses and knowing the challenges with raising capital. And so we were aware that, many other times people go out for capital or investment. There's so much additional equity being taken. Oftentimes, if you work with an accelerator or an incubator, they actually charge, they take some equity, and eventually just sort of little cut after little cut, a lot of the ownership can be eroded away from the founders. So we wanted to make sure that, one, there was minimal costs to any business until after they had already raised the money. So, we know that you're cash strapped and you've been funding this, out of your own pocket. So we don't want to charge big fees or anything before you've raised the money. And then after you've raised the money, so now you've got your $1 million, congratulations, then we charge a reasonable, fair fee to cover our expenses, but we're not trying to additionally take, we want stock in your company as well as our fees, which, some other businesses do, but that's not our approach. We want to make sure that you as a founder are treated fairly and respectfully, and the business stays yours.
And the other thing I wanted just to mention before we sign off is, what's the length of the time of the whole process from starting to getting the money?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So the first thing I'll say is the maximum an equity crowdfunding round can last is 90 days. So the campaign itself is 90 days maximum, but it also ends sooner if you reach your maximum investment limit. Also, from the point of application, if all the documents are prepared and you're ready to go, that's about 6 to 4 weeks. If there's a bit more help that you need preparing those documents, it can take a little bit longer. So it's essentially 6 weeks of prep, the campaign, and then 2 weeks of closing, but potentially shorter than that. So if you add that all together, it's about 5 months if you run a full-length campaign and you're successful between beginning and getting the funds. But if you have everything ready beforehand and you run a really great campaign and you're done in a month, you can go from sending your application in to getting your money in like 2 months.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And I always want to, when you're going to investors or VCs, sometimes it takes, 6 months to a year just to do due diligence.
Right. The traditional saying is 9 months, 9 meetings.
Yeah, and that's that's why I
Right.
say 6 months to a year, because it's right
Exactly.
in the middle.
And then you also have those legal fees, usually between 30 and 50,000 to
That
redo
they're
your
taken right off
shareholders
the
agreement.
top. Yeah, and
Right.
the board shares and the board seats and the control, like it's
Right.
VC
The
money is
liquidity
the most expensive.
provisions and yeah.
So if people want to find out more, where do they go?
They go to equivesto.com, EQUIVESTO.com. vesto.com. We have a learning center for investors and companies. We have the document templates. We have details about everything you could want to know about what we do and how equity crowdfunding works. Or you can email me. My information is also on the site.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for everyone taking the time. We'll see you again next Tuesday when, what are we talking about?
That's
Building
a good
your
question.
community.
Yes, thank you, Craig. Building the community.
I just thought you might go to that. So if you're talking about either with crowdfunding or not, come back next week on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about building your community. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for the questions. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.